At Thanksgiving, my mother Margaret looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've always been a burden." My brother Dylan laughed, cutting through the silence like a knife. "At least I make this family proud," he said, smirking over a glass of wine I paid for. The room froze, but no one spoke up. Not my father Franklin, not anyone. Just me sitting there realizing that in my own family I was a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. I put down my fork, stood up, and walked out. No yelling, no tears, just a quiet decision that changed everything. Weeks later, my father Franklin called, voice sharp with disappointment. "Why is the mortgage unpaid?" he demanded. I didn't hesitate. "Ask your pride and joy," I said and hung up. That was the moment I stopped being invisible. That was the day I stopped paying for their comfort, their silence, and their lies. They thought I'd crawl back. They had no idea what I was about to do next. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories can reach. Sometimes just knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now let me tell you everything. If you've ever been the quiet one in the room, the one who gave too much and got nothing back, this story is for you. I'm Ethan Cole, and what happened after that night changed everything I believed about family loyalty and what it means to finally stand up for yourself. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. It helps me keep telling the truth no one else dares to. The smell of butter, cinnamon, and roasted turkey hung heavy in my parents' kitchen. Same house, same worn tile, same silence that settled whenever I came home. Maplewood, Kansas hadn't changed, and neither had my family. My mother Margaret was at the stove wrist, flicking the ladle like a conductor, commanding without looking up. "Mash the potatoes," she said. "No hello, no, how was the drive? Just orders." I nodded and got to work. The TV in the living room was blasting ESPN highlights. My father Franklin sat half asleep in his recliner, pretending not to hear the tension humming through the walls. He liked to stay out of the crossfire. His heart, as he often reminded us, was too fragile for conflict. I'd been there since noon, peeling, stirring, timing the oven. My shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat running down my back. My mother Margaret didn't notice. Or maybe she did and just decided acknowledgement was optional. That was the pattern. I handled the practical parts of family life, while the spotlight stayed fixed on my brother Dylan. Dylan arrived almost an hour late, smelling like expensive cologne and borrowed success. He burst through the front door carrying a bottle of Merlot and his latest PR girlfriend who looked barely old enough to rent a car. "Traffic was hell," he announced. Mom's whole face lit up as if royalty had entered the room. "There's my boy," Margaret beamed, kissing his cheek. Franklin straightened in his chair, proud just to watch the show. I stayed by the counter, checking the timer, making sure the rolls didn't burn. When dinner began, I served dishes, poured water, and sat down only when everyone else had a full plate. Margaret started in right away, telling Dylan stories for him. His new clients, his startup idea, his networking events in Kansas City. She said it all like she was reading scripture. Franklin nodded along, smiling faintly as if these tales restored some lost dignity he could still claim through his golden son. Then she looked at me. "You know, Ethan," she said, slicing her turkey with deliberate calm, "you've always been a burden. You act like you're helping us, but you just remind me how much we've had to carry." The words hit harder because she didn't even raise her voice. It wasn't anger. It was verdict. Dylan chuckled. "At least I make this family proud." For a second, no one moved. The TV buzzed faintly in the background. I set down my fork, straightened my napkin on the table like closing a file, and said quietly, "I understand." I stood, pushed my chair in, grabbed my coat. No one stopped me. Franklin cleared his throat but said nothing. Margaret didn't even look up. I walked through the hall, past the family photos that skipped over me, Dylan's football trophies, graduation pictures, Margaret's teaching awards. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the family ringtone. I flipped it silent. Outside, the air smelled like cold soil and wood smoke. I got in my car, started the engine, and watched the porch light fade behind me. As I drove into the fog curling off the highway, I thought, when people get used to your invisibility, they forget you can leave. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. I went home to Boulder and that night opened my banking app. At the top of the screen was the auto pay schedule for my parents' mortgage. I hovered over the button Heart Steady, then tapped Turn Off. The prompt appeared. Are you sure? Yes. In Boulder, silence had its own texture. Not peaceful, deliberate, the kind you build piece by piece until it becomes a wall no one can climb. I sat at my desk that night, laptop, glowing spreadsheets open. For years, my finances had been a hidden map of quiet sacrifices, mortgage transfers, utility bills, hospital copays. I deleted every recurring payment one by one. The list shortened, my breathing evened out. The apartment felt larger, almost foreign, without their demands echoing inside it. Hours later, my phone vibrated. A text from Margaret. Handle the mortgage before it affects our credit. Don't be childish. No greeting, no question if I was okay. I read it once and typed back 2 words. Read it. Then turned my phone face down. The next evening, a notification popped up, a message from Lisa Grant in Maplewood. She'd sent me a link. When I opened it, I saw a Facebook post. My family gathered under the Christmas tree. Margaret and Franklin smiling, Dylan holding a glass of wine. The caption read, "The ones who matter stay together." I stared at it for a long minute. I wasn't tagged. My chair felt suddenly too small for me. That's how erasure looks in real time. One photo, one caption, and you're gone. Lisa called, soon after, her voice low. Your mom's been telling people you're not well, that you had some kind of breakdown. I didn't believe her, she added, hesitating. You should know. I kept my tone calm. Do you still have the garage key from Grandma's house? She paused, confused. Yeah, why I might need it soon, I said, and hung up. That night I opened a drawer and found an old sticky note with passwords scrawled across it, reminders from when Dylan borrowed the family iPad to help me set up their Wi-Fi. A thought hit me cold. That device was still logged into my old backup email. I signed into my account, navigated to the security log. There it was, multiple late-night logins from an IP address in Maplewood. For a moment, I couldn't move. They'd been in my account maybe months, maybe longer. I changed everything. Every password, every 2-factor authentication, every recovery question. I removed all trusted devices, shut down the old cloud folder, set up new alerts for sign-ins. When the last one cleared, the screen went blank, reflecting my own face back at me. I thought it would feel like relief, but it didn't. It felt like surgery, cutting out something rotten I'd lived with so long I'd forgotten it was poisoning me. Before shutting down the laptop, I noticed one more notification in the corner: soft credit inquiry, Pioneer Federal Bank. My chest tightened. I marked it unread, starred it for later. The name under joint applicant made my stomach turn, initials DC Dylan Cole. The glow of the screen dimmed. The apartment fell quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I sat there realizing my silence had structure now, not weakness, not retreat strategy. And for the first time, I knew exactly how far it could reach. Rain swept across the gravel driveway as I pulled up to my late grandmother's old place on the edge of Maplewood. The house had been empty for years, its windows fogged with dust, the garage door half rusted shut. Lisa met me there holding the key I'd asked for 4 days earlier. You really think there's something left in here? She asked. I nodded. If my grandfather kept records, he kept them here. The garage smelled like old motor oil and damp wood. When we pried open the metal cabinet, the hinges shrieked like they were remembering something. Inside were piles of yellowed papers, receipts, and cracked folders marked with faded ink. One folder caught my eye, a box labeled Eldon C. in my grandfather's handwriting. I set it on the workbench and blew the dust off. Inside were neatly bundled bills, some dating back over a decade. Roofing repairs, heating system replacements, maintenance costs on my parents' house, all marked paid by Ethan C. I felt a slow burn in my chest, proof of everything I'd done quietly, everything they'd dismissed as the bare minimum. Then, under a stack of receipts, I found a torn brown envelope. The handwriting across it read, "Acknowledgement Mortgage Assistance." My breath caught. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page typed, notarized, and signed by both my parents, Margaret and Franklin Cole, with a witness signature from Reverend Paul Jenkins, the pastor of their local church. The document stated that I had contributed over $100,000 toward mortgage payments and home repairs over multiple years as an act of goodwill and familial support. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The rain hit the tin roof like static. Lisa leaned closer. "You think he knew this would matter someday?" she whispered. I nodded. Grandpa always said paper outlives memory. I snapped a few photos, scanned it, using my phone, uploaded everything to a secure cloud folder, and locked the cabinet back. As we stepped outside, thunder cracked in the distance. My phone vibrated, unknown number. "This is Pioneer Federal Bank," a man's voice said politely. "Mr. Cole, we're following up on a loan application listing you and Dylan Cole as co-signers. We just need verbal confirmation from you." The world seemed to narrow. "I didn't apply for any loan," I said evenly. There was a pause on the other end. "That's odd," the man replied. "The application has your electronic signature and bank statements. I can email the file for verification." "Do that," I said, my voice tight. Minutes later, standing under the porch light while rain dripped from my jacket, I opened the email. A PDF file loaded slowly. Page 1 listed both our names. Page 2 had my bank details. And on page 3, my signature, clean, precise, identical to mine, placed beside Dylan's. Except I had never touched that paper. My hands went cold. Lisa looked at me, her face pale. "What is it?" she asked. I turned the screen toward her. "Forgery," I said quietly. He actually did it. The rain drowned out everything else. I stared at the digital signature until my pulse steadied. Then I opened my email client and typed a new message addressed to Emily Warren, attorney at law. Subject line, "Start now." Attached was the PDF along with photos of the acknowledgement letter. My last line read, "He's crossed it. Begin the process." I hit send. The screen went dark. It started with Franklin's voice on a rainy Monday evening. I had just finished freezing my credit and closing the last shared account when his name appeared on my phone screen. For a second, I almost didn't answer. Then I did. "Ethan," he said, his voice thin and strained. "Why hasn't the mortgage been paid? Your mother's been crying all day. You can't just walk away. You'll ruin our credit." I looked out the window at the rain streaking down the glass. "Ask the son you're proud of," I said, and hung up. The silence that followed was absolute. No more calls, no texts, just a void. But voids have a way of filling themselves, usually with lies. A week later, Lisa called again. "I need to tell you something," she said carefully. "Your mom's been telling people at church that you've had a breakdown, that you're unstable, ungrateful. She's making it sound like you abandoned them." I didn't react. "She always was good at rewriting stories," I said. "Tell her this one's not finished yet." 2 days later, a letter arrived at my apartment, handwritten, folded perfectly. I knew her penmanship before I even opened it. "Family is forever," it began. You can't turn your back on blood. You've hurt your mother more than you know. Your brother made mistakes, but he's still your brother. Please come home. We can fix this. I read it once, placed it in my desk drawer, and closed it without replying. Helping them used to feel like duty. Now it felt like addiction. The first step was withdrawal. Weeks passed. My silence hardened into something solid. Then Lisa called again, her tone sharper this time. "Dylan got fired," she said. "Something about company funds." "He's back at your parents' place," Lisa said. I leaned back in my chair. "So the empire collapses." "They're trying to get you to bail them out again," she added. "Margaret said they're thinking of asking you to help just this once." That night, a text from Margaret popped up on my phone. "Come for dinner. I made your favorite. Let's talk." I stared at it until it faded from the screen. 2 days later, another message came, this time from Franklin. "We just need a little help, Ethan. One time. We'll pay you back." I could almost hear his voice, weary, expectant, assuming I'd fold the way I always had. I didn't. I sat in the dark, phone in hand, watching the words blur as my reflection floated over them. Then I deleted the messages one by one. The next morning, I opened my email to find Emily's reply waiting. "We filed the fraud report. Stay quiet, but stay ready. When they reach out again, document everything." I typed back, "Understood." Later that week, as rain hammered against the windows, I poured myself a drink and stood by the glass watching the city lights blur. The hum of traffic below felt distant, like another life. My phone was silent. My family was silent. And for once, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like space room to breathe, to plan, to reclaim what they tried to take. I thought of the line Margaret had written, "Family is forever." She was right, just not in the way she meant. Some bonds don't break. They rot. I took one last sip, set the glass down, and whispered to myself, "My silence used to be love. Now it's a lesson." Then I turned off the lights. The apartment went dark, but inside me, something finally switched on. I drove through the night without music, just the steady hum of tires and the hollow sound of my thoughts. The highway thinned as I reached the Smoky Ridge Hills, where fog swallowed the trees and the radio lost its signal. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt trail, small and crooked, built by my grandfather's hands decades ago. It had no internet, no reception, no distractions, exactly what I needed. I unlocked the door, the hinges groaning in protest. The air smelled of pine dust and old coffee. I lit a single lamp and set my laptop on the wooden table. My backpack carried only what mattered: receipts, the acknowledgement letter, and a half-finished notebook of numbers that had kept my parents' house afloat for years. I wasn't there to rest. I was there to write everything down before history could be rewritten again. As the rain began tapping against the roof, I rummaged through the old cabinet near the fireplace. Inside were photographs, faded postcards, and a stack of letters bound by twine. On top, an envelope addressed in my grandfather's handwriting. "To whoever remembers what's worth keeping." Inside, one short note read, "Son, there are debts that don't need to be paid, only released." I stared at that line for a long time. For years I'd been repaying a kind of invisible debt, the cost of being the good son, the dependable one, the one who fixed everything quietly while they took the credit. That night, something in me began to shift. I opened my laptop and started a new spreadsheet. One column for each year, one row for every payment repair or bailout I'd made. Mortgage installments, hospital bills, roof repairs, loan transfers. By midnight, the total was over $100,000. I stared at the number until my eyes blurred. Every digit was proof of small, measurable weight of the years I'd spent trying to earn belonging. When dawn came, the fog pressed against the windows like a wall of glass. My phone vibrated. A weak signal caught the edge of the ridge. A text from Emily Warren Dillon under official investigation. "Be careful. Your mother's been talking to the local paper. She's painting you as the son who abandoned them. I let the message sit. I wasn't angry, just tired. They were still rewriting stories even as the truth sharpened its edges. I typed my reply slowly. Then, it's time to write mine. I spent the next 2 days building my case. Organized folders dated receipts, screenshots, the acknowledgement letter from the garage notarized and scanned. I created a digital timeline so precise it could cut through any lie. When I was done, I saved everything to an encrypted drive and sent copies to Emily. Her response came minutes later. This is enough to open a civil claim for attempted fraud and unauthorized use of personal data. You're covered. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the window streaked with rain. The forest was silent. My reflection looked back at me. Older, harder, calmer. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to them. I was preparing. I left the cabin at sunrise. The air was cold and clean, the light cutting through the mist like a blade. As I locked the door behind me, I whispered, I once left the table to keep the peace. Now I'm coming back to clear it. The road back to Boulder felt lighter. I had everything I needed. Truth, time, and proof. And this time, they would have to face all three. It was a Friday morning in late March when Emily called. Her voice was calm, but her words hit like thunder. It's official. Foreclosure has been filed. The house is going up for auction on April 10th at the Douglas County Courthouse. I sat still, phone against my ear. Is there a way to intervene? Yes, she said, but only through a proxy. If you want to buy it well, do it through an LLC quietly. No one connects it to you. I don't need them to know, I said. I just need to know it's not theirs anymore. That same day, we registered Silverwood Holdings LLC, a clean, faceless entity with no ties to my name. Emily arranged a legal representative to attend the auction on behalf of the company. I booked a one-way ticket to Kansas using an alias and checked into a small motel near the courthouse. They thought I had vanished. In truth, I was returning. Maplewood looked exactly as it had when I left. The bakery still smelled like cinnamon rolls. The church bells still cracked at noon. Mrs. Helen Brooks, my old neighbor, spotted me as I passed her fence. Ethan Cole, she said, eyes wide. I heard your folks are having a hard time. Everyone learns the cost of things eventually, I said, and kept walking. That night, I parked across from my parents' house. The windows glowed faintly yellow, the porch light flickering. Through the curtain, I saw Margaret sitting at the table, shoulders bent. Franklin sat motionless beside her. I didn't feel hatred, just distance, like watching strangers play roles they'd rehearsed too long. I drove away before they could see me. The next morning, the courthouse smelled faintly of dust and old wood polish. The auction room was small 10 chairs, 1 clerk, 1 microphone. Emily's representative, a composed woman in a gray suit, took a seat near the back. I stayed unseen behind the glass partition. When the clerk read the list, my parents' address echoed through the room. 84 Pinecrest Drive, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 4 months, delinquent. The bidding started at $260,000. A local investor raised his hand. Then a middle-aged couple. The numbers climbed slowly, 265, 268, 270. My representative lifted her paddle. 275. The room fell quiet. Sold, the clerk announced. Silverwood Holdings, LLC. Just like that, it was done. Years of sacrifice, erasure, and silence reduced to one strike of a gavel. Outside, Emily met me on the courthouse steps. She handed me a folder. There's more, she said. I found something in the county archives. A 2018 acknowledgement letter signed by both your parents, witnessed by Reverend Paul Jenkins, confirmed you paid over $100,000 to save the house from foreclosure. It's legally binding, Emily said. You're not just the buyer now, you're the rightful benefactor. For a long time, I couldn't speak. They had signed their own confession years ago, the proof of everything they denied. Later that afternoon, I saw them. I'd stopped by the town square to grab coffee when I spotted three familiar figures across the street. Margaret, Franklin, and Dylan stood outside the bank. Margaret's face was pale, Franklin's jaw tight, and Dylan looked worn, his confidence gone. They were pleading with the teller through the glass. When Margaret turned, she saw me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Dylan's shoulders stiffened. I walked closer. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Chasing another loan, I asked quietly. No one answered. "Good luck with that," I said, and stepped past them. No anger, no triumph, just the sound of my shoes on the wet pavement. 2 weeks later, the deed transferred officially. Silverwood Holdings, LLC became the owner of 84 Pinecrest Drive. Emily emailed me the final confirmation subject line. "You did it." I opened the attachment and stared at the document. My parents' names, the same names that once signed every check I funded, now sat beneath mine, marked as previous owners. I thought back to every night I'd paid their bills while they called me ungrateful. Every moment they mistook my silence for weakness. Now I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth had done it for me. The house that once kept me out now belonged to me. And for the first time I didn't feel small. For years I kept their world standing while I stood outside. Now I no longer needed permission to cross that threshold. It was mine. And this time the silence was finally on my side. A week after the auction, the paperwork was finalized. Emily mailed the ownership documents to my apartment in Boulder, along with a short note that said, "Only it's officially yours." I turned the pages slowly, letting the weight of it sink in. My name, not theirs, sat cleanly above the Douglas County seal. For a moment, I didn't feel victory. I just felt quiet. When Emily called later that evening, her tone was light but curious. So she asked, "What are you going to do with it now?" I looked out the window at the city fading into dusk. "I'm not going to keep it," I said. "He'll give it a purpose better than what they ever imagined." She paused, then said softly, "That sounds exactly like you. That sounds exactly like you." A few days later, a forwarded envelope arrived from my old address. It was thin, handwritten, Margaret's cursive curving across the front. For a second, I considered throwing it away unopened, but curiosity, or maybe something older than that, made me tear it open. Inside were just a few lines. "You won, Ethan. But family isn't something to destroy. Remember, blood is still blood. No apology, no ownership. Just another attempt to pull me back into her definition of loyalty." I read it once, then smiled, not cruelly, just with clarity. "Blood doesn't make family," I said to the empty room. "Actions do." I fed the letter into the shredder. The paper vanished in thin strips, each one carrying a piece of the story I no longer owed anyone. The next morning, Emily called again, this time with news that didn't surprise me. Dylan took a plea deal, she said. Identity theft and attempted fraud. Suspended sentence, heavy fine, permanent record. I didn't ask for details. "Was there a statement?" I said. She hesitated. "He said he never meant to hurt you, that he thought you'd understand." I let out a dry laugh. "I do. That's the problem. There was a silence between us, the kind that holds more understanding than words." Finally, I said, "I don't need him punished, Emily. I just needed the truth to have a place to stand." She exhaled. "Well, it does now." Weeks passed. The story of the Coles faded into local gossip, a family once admired now whispered about in fragments. I stayed out of it. Instead, I focused on what came next. The house was mine, but keeping it didn't feel right. I wanted it to mean something, not just to remind me where I came from. I reached out to a nonprofit I'd read about months earlier, the Cedar Path Foundation in Douglas County. They worked with young adults aging out of foster care, helping them find stability and a sense of home. I offered the property, no conditions, no publicity. The director was stunned. "You're sure?" she asked. "Most people don't just give away a house. Most people didn't grow up inside one they had to earn the right to stand in," I said. We worked quietly through the paperwork. They renovated the house, repaired the porch, painted the walls, and left the front door a warm chestnut brown. When it was done, they added a small brass plaque near the steps, the Cole Home Project. I didn't attend the ribbon cutting. I didn't need to. Emily sent me a photo of a group of smiling young adults on the porch holding boxes of donated books, pizza boxes stacked high beside them. The place looked alive in a way it never had when I lived there. Months later, in the early summer, I returned to Maplewood one last time. The drive was long and quiet, the kind of silence that didn't hurt anymore. The house stood brighter than before, new paint glimmering under the sun. The lawn was neat kids running barefoot through sprinklers, laughter echoing across the street. Mrs. Helen Brooks waved from her yard just like she had when I was a boy. "Well, look who it is," she said. "You came home." "Just passing through," I said, smiling. She gestured toward the house. "You did a good thing, you know. You made it live again." I looked at the front porch where a pair of teenagers were stringing up fairy lights. "No," I said quietly. "I just gave it back to life." That evening, I parked across the street as dusk fell. Through the window I could see them, the new residents eating pizza on the floor, playing music off someone's phone. There was warmth in that house now. Not the brittle kind my parents once performed, but something real. I leaned against the hood of my car, hands in my pockets, and let the night air wrap around me. For years I thought justice meant making them admit what they'd done. But standing there, hearing laughter from behind those walls, I understood something else. Justice isn't about forcing guilt. It's about freeing yourself from needing it. They took my voice, my trust, my place at their table, but I found something better, the right to build my own. I glanced at the house one last time and whispered, "I used to be the forgotten son. Now, I'm the one who rewrote the legacy." Then I got in my car and drove into the dark, the wind rushing through the open window. For years that house had been a symbol of what I'd lost. Now it carried what I'd found: purpose, peace, and a version of myself that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. As the highway stretched out ahead, the lights of Maplewood disappeared behind me. I thought about that Thanksgiving night, the fork clinking against the plate. Margaret's words, Dylan's laugh, how small I'd felt, how heavy the silence had been. Now the silence felt different, lighter earned. The road opened wide, the night clear, and as the wind tore past, I whispered to no one but the stars. I finally left that table. But this time, I took freedom with me. And I never looked back. Autumn came early that year. Boulder's air turned crisp, the kind of cool that sneaks into your lungs and makes you aware you're alive. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. Months had passed since the Cole Home Project opened, and life had quietly rearranged itself around me. I woke up without the dread of incoming calls or guilt-laced messages. I worked. I walked to the park every evening, and I cooked for one without feeling the absence of anyone else at the table. But peace isn't silence. It's learning what to do with it. Sometimes I'd find myself checking my email at night, half expecting another message from Emily, another update about the family I'd stopped belonging to, but none came. The last one she sent simply said, "Case closed. File archived." She'd attached the final court record. State of Kansas versus Dylan Cole, sentence fulfilled. It was strange how a life could be condensed into a paragraph. For years, my family had made noise loud enough to drown me out. Now all that noise had settled into a single line of text. One evening, I stopped by Emily's office downtown to drop off a box of documents she'd asked me to keep. Her desk was stacked with case files, but she smiled when she saw me. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel like someone finally turned off the static," I told her. She tilted her head. "You ever think of seeing them again?" I shook my head. No, I think the best goodbye is no words at all. She nodded. Closure doesn't need an audience. Outside the city pulsed with ordinary life laughter spilling from a calf, the hum of traffic, a couple arguing softly over groceries. I stood there for a long time, realizing how much life had missed trying to fix people who never wanted to be fixed. The next weekend, I drove north again, not to Maplewood, but just past it near the bluff that overlooked Douglas County. The trees had started to turn amber, the same shade as the wood my grandfather used to stain the porch rails. From up there, I could almost see the roof of the Cole Home project. I parked, sat on the hood of my car, and let the wind move through the trees. For a while, I thought about my parents not as villains, not even as victims, just as people trapped by their own need for pride. Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. Blood is still blood. Maybe she was right in some way. Maybe the point wasn't to erase where I came from, but to finally accept that I'd never get what I once needed from it. In the distance, church bells rang faintly. For the first time in years, they didn't make me flinch. I drove down to town and stopped by the bakery. Mrs. Helen Brooks was there wiping flour from her hands. Ethan Cole, she said with a grin. You still sneak into this town like a ghost, maybe I said. But this time I think I'm here as myself. She packed me a paper bag of sweet rolls. On the house, she said. You've done something good. You should know that. I thanked her, and before leaving she added, Your mother called the bakery once, you know. She asked if I'd seen you. Sounded tired. I didn't ask for details. I just nodded. There was nothing left to say. Before sunset, I stopped by the house one last time. The lawn was greener than ever, the fence freshly painted white. Kids were laughing again, different ones this time, and a young woman sat on the porch reading. When she saw me, she smiled politely, unaware of who I was. That anonymity felt like a blessing. I stood on the sidewalk, taking in the sight of it all. The same front door I once opened with dread now stood as a doorway to new beginnings for people I'd never meet. There was something poetic in that, the way pain can be recycled into something generous if you just stop holding on to it. I left a letter with the foundation director the next morning. It wasn't long, just a few lines tucked into an unmarked envelope. For whoever calls this place home, may you never have to earn your seat at the table. May your laughter never echo off silence, and may you always leave the door open for the next soul who needs it. I didn't sign my name. The house didn't need another Cole on its walls. It needed to stand on its own. On the drive back to Boulder, the sky opened up with rain, soft but steady. I rolled the window down and let the drops hit my arm, the scent of wet earth mixing with the faint smell of pine. Every mile between me and Maplewood felt like a breath I'd been holding for years finally being released. When I reached the city, lights glowed across the skyline, and a strange thought crossed my mind. I didn't owe anyone an ending. The story had already written itself quietly, completely without applause. I got home, turned off my phone, and stood by the window, watching the rain fall across the streetlights. Somewhere inside that rhythm, I realized the truth I'd been chasing all along. Peace isn't what happens when justice arrives. It's what happens when the noise stops mattering. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd started in the cabin months before, and wrote a single line at the bottom of the last page. You can't rebuild a family that never existed, but you can build a life that doesn't need one. I closed it and placed it on the shelf. Then I sat down, turned off every light, and let the darkness be what it was.